we want to talk about real wealth, and I kind of define real wealth as quality of life. And I want to start by mentioning that I think all of us have personal heroes. And my personal hero was a man that many of you may have heard of. His name was David Brower. He was the fellow who built the Sierra Club into a major environmental organization, later founded Friends of the Earth and Earth Island Institute, on whose board I currently serve. I had the honor of knowing David for the last 28 years of his life until he died in 2000. And I was able to see him about 5 days before he died, together with a friend of mine, the farmer Michael Abelman. Many of you may know Michael's work as well. We went to see David at the Alta Bates Hospital in Berkeley, California. And you could tell by the way he looked that the end was near. But I'm a kind of an optimistic guy. People know that about me. And so I kind of wanted to cheer him up. As we were leaving, I said, well, goodbye, David, but I hope that the next time I see you, you will be out there fighting the good fight, and you'll be healthy again, and blah, 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 blah. And he looked at me right in the eye, and he said, John, I don't think that's in the cards. But it's been a great 88 years. I think that's what all of us want to be able to say when we come to the end of our days, that our life has meant something, we have done something, we have contributed something, however long it is, if it's 30 years or 50 or 88 or 150, we want to be able to say that. So I think David Brower died a happy man. This is, after all, a happiness conference. But he also died a worried man. And in the latter years of his life, he used to give what he called his sermon. And I want to summarize that sermon, which went on for fairly long, as sermons do, but I'm going to give you the shorthand version. In his sermon, David Brower took the age of the earth, estimated by scientists as something like 4.6 billion years, and he compressed that into a single week. When you do that, a day is 650 million years, an hour is 27 million, a minute is about 450,000, and a second is 7,500. So the Earth begins on Sunday morning. It congeals out of all this primordial stuff, and by Tuesday, the first life appears. And in the next few days, that life becomes more complex and bigger and more wondrous, until on the very last day of the week, Saturday, at about noon, the really big guys show up on the planet, the giant reptiles, the dinosaurs. And they have a pretty long run. They last until 4 o'clock in the afternoon on the last day of the week, until an asteroid hits the Gulf of Mexico and the climate becomes too cool for them to continue to exist. But then, 3 minutes before midnight, again on the final day of the week, we human beings arrive on the planet. At 1/3 of a second before midnight, Buddha shows up. At 1/4 of a second, Christ. At 1/25 of a second before midnight, we have this thing we call the Industrial Revolution in the late 1700s. And finally, about 1/100th of a second before midnight on the final night of the week, we get this consumer society that followed World War II. And David Brower mentioned that in that 1/100th of a second, that blink of an eye in geological time, we have managed to use more resources than all human beings who ever lived in all time did before that time. We have managed to deplete our fossil fuels, our forests, our fisheries, our soils, and God knows what else by half. We have caused the extinction of countless species, and we are dramatically changing the climate. Now, Brower said, there are people out there who believe that what we've been doing for that last 1/100th of a second can go on indefinitely. In fact, they are considered normal, reasonable, intelligent people. Indeed, they run our corporations. They run our governments. But in fact, they are stark, raving mad. We can't go on like this. We have got to figure something else out. So in the meantime, these leaders keep telling us that the answer to everything is growth, more growth. On this, the Democrats and the Republicans agree. They might not agree with what to do with the growth or how to get it, but the answer is growth. Well, what is growth? We know that growth, in fact, is the increase of this thing we call the gross domestic product. The grosser it gets, the better we think we are. But the gross domestic product is a very blunt instrument. It counts a lot of things that aren't so cool. Oil spills and the money we spend to clean them up. Diseases and the money we spend to treat them. Crime and the prisons we build and fill, spending more money per prisoner than we would spend to send them to Harvard. All of that counts as a plus when it comes to the GDP. Now, what doesn't count? Housework. Volunteering in your community, one of the most important things that we can do for happiness and for well-being. Time spent out in nature, again, the connection to green space, so important. These things are a waste of time as far as the GDP is concerned. And as Bobby Kennedy put it, the GDP measures, in short, everything except that which makes life worthwhile. Pretty simple. So, in fact, we're very proud that our GDP is increasing faster than other folks in various places. Stefano Bartolini, a friend of mine and an economist from the University of Siena, has pointed out that, in fact, our rather rapid growth in the US compared to Europe is actually a sign of decay, not of dynamism, because it really measures a lot of the defensive expenditures in health and all kinds of things that we are really using to deal with the problems caused by previous growth. And we can go into that. Herman Daly calls it uneconomic growth, when you look at, in fact, what's happening. Now, Bhutan is a place that I had a chance to visit a couple of years ago. You've all heard of Bhutan. It's this happiness place. In fact, back in 1972, the then 16-year-old king of Bhutan, upon his coronation, was asked what he thought, what he was going to do to increase his country's gross national product. They called it that then. And he said, well, with all due respect, I think that gross national happiness is more important than gross national product. You know, kids say the darndest things. But, you know, what would we have done here? We would have taken that, we would have laughed, we would have said, oh my God, you know, whoa, kids. But in Bhutan, they take the king seriously. And they spent the next 30-plus years trying to figure out what makes people happy so they could base their policies on those things. And they brought people from around the world to contribute to that conversation. I happen to be lucky enough to be one of those people in early 2013. I went to Bhutan as part of a team to help them develop a paper for the United Nations and had the chance to meet with their cabinet and other folks. And there was a group of us there from various countries, and we had some tensions about a couple of things. Number one, some of us were very uncomfortable with the term happiness. Maybe I got the kind of the creeps. It's like this word that's so vague, it's so, you know, etc. We need a real word like well-being. So that was one group, well-being versus happiness. And then the other debate between people was what makes us happy, what increases well-being. Is it personal behavior and attitudes, or is it policy change? And really, this tension was increasing. And then finally, Enrico Giovannini, who shortly after that became Minister of Labor in the government of Italy, came out in front of all of us, and he took a stick and he drew a diagram in the sand. And he said, hey, think about it this way. He said, think of well-being and happiness not as synonymous, but simply as similar. That in fact, well-being are those things about quality of life that we can measure objectively. So when it comes to health, it's life expectancy, infant mortality, and so forth. Think of happiness as those aspects of the quality of life that we measure subjectively through surveys. So think of, in this case, health is, how do you feel about your health? I feel good, I'm in pain, and so on. And he said, understand that the purpose of policy really is to improve well-being and the main basic standards for everybody in an equitable way, because we know that nothing is more toxic to happiness than inequality. So that's the start. But then you can have a good quality of life, a good well-being, and not be happy. And that's where the personal side comes in. For instance, you could have enough leisure time, but if you use all that time to watch television, you're not likely to be happier, you're likely to be more stressed, and all of those things. And so what we need in between well-being and happiness is a set of things called happiness skills. We need to learn to be grateful. We need to learn to be tolerant. We need to learn to be patient. We need to learn all kinds of things like that. And then we need to figure out how to measure these things because, unfortunately, in our society, we get what we measure. So there are some measurements. Gallup measures happiness, for example. There's a thing also called the GNH index that you can check out here in the States if you go to the website happycounts.org and take the survey. It takes 15 minutes. It'll give you a score on the 10 domains of well-being that Bhutan pays attention to. So I suggest that you do that. But what does Gallup show? Poll after poll in Gallup shows that a number of countries come out on top in the well-being scores, or the happiness scores, however you want to call them, and those are primarily countries in Northern Europe, led by Denmark, but also including Sweden, Norway, and the Netherlands, and so forth. What do these happy countries have in common? Well, number one, they are among the world's most egalitarian countries. They have the smallest gap between rich and poor. They have strong social safety nets. They design their cities around bikes and walking and human connection and not around the automobile. They pay the highest taxes in the world. They pay the highest taxes in the world, and they have the shortest working hours in the world, the most leisure time. And all of these things, of course, as Helena mentioned to me, are under attack because as the US model and the model of globalization and cutting and all of these things come forth, all of this sort of thing is under attack. So we need to defend these things. We need to really think about these very specific things that help in making people happy and which the data shows that. We will find that time and time balance is really central to this, that the shorter working hours is a huge part of this, and it's something we need to think about because if we want to grow our own food and take time to eat right and take time to exercise and all of these things, then we can't be working the horrendous hours that people are working in the United States. We can't do it. We are absolutely harried and rushed. We work more than people in almost any other country. We are the only rich nation in the world that has no guarantee of paid leave when a mother has a baby, no guarantee of sick leave when you get sick from work, so you go to work sick, and no guarantee of any paid vacation time whatsoever. In fact, there's only 4 other countries in the whole world, count them, in the whole world that don't give people some paid time off for vacation. They are Suriname, Guyana, Nepal, and that paragon of human rights, Burma, plus us. That's it. There's only one other country in the entire world that doesn't give mothers maternity leave when they have a baby. That's Papua New Guinea. We are unique. The United States is exceptional for all the wrong reasons, and that's the point that we have to make. So we need to build food and health and community by slowing down, and I love Vicki's slow food idea, slow time idea. It's something I've been working at for a long time. We also need a new vision to call what we want to call ourselves, this kind of society. I think the line new economy doesn't work very well. It's pretty vague. I'd like to ask us to return to an old phrase that used to describe exactly the kind of vision we want, with cooperatives and small local businesses. And yes, there's some big stuff too that is actually popularly run and controlled. That vision from the 1880s to the 1930s in the United States was called the Cooperative Commonwealth. And I believe it's something we should return to. So finally, to bring this to an end, on January the 11th, 1912, very cold day, thousands of workers, most of them women and most of them immigrants, left the textile mills of Lawrence, Massachusetts, to march in the snowy streets of that city, demanding a very small raise in pay from 16 to 18 cents an hour, and a cut in their working hours from 56 to 54 a week. And the story goes that as they marched in the streets, they carried in front of them a banner which read, "We want bread and roses too." And the bread was the symbol of the higher wages, which would have meant 4 more real loaves of bread on the tables for their poor kids. But those women, as poor as they were, knew that happiness wasn't about bread alone, that life was not about bread alone. As poor as they were, they knew they needed the roses. Time for art and love and beauty, time to smell the roses. And it's something I think we understood as a people for a long time. Yeah, until after World War II, until the consumer society, when we decided to put all the focus on the bread and the money and the stuff, and we left the roses to wilt. And I think it's time we water them again. Thank you.